11 years of pretending not to speak had taught her how to disappear in plain sight. Tonight, she wasn't a fugitive. She was a cocktail waitress. The casino pulsed with supernatural energy. Vampires lounged in velvet booths, shifters prowled the blackjack tables, fae whispered secrets over glowing dice. Aria moved through it all like a shadow, her tray balanced, her eyes sharp. She didn't need words to navigate this world. She needed anonymity. Ruby Chen, the floor manager, greeted her with a clipboard and a raised brow. "You're the mute one, right?" Aria nodded once. Ruby shrugged. "Fine. Just don't spill drinks on the vampires. They bite." Behind her, Phoenix Williams leaned against a pillar, arms crossed. Security. Tall, broad, and unmistakably wolf. His gaze lingered on Aria a beat too long. She didn't flinch. Training was brisk. Ruby rattled off rules. No touching, no magic, no drama. Aria listened, memorized, and kept her silence. She learned the layout, the clientele, the hierarchy. The high roller tables were off limits, unless summoned. The back rooms, don't ask. The penthouse, only one man went there. Kieran Morrison. Owner? Alpha. Enigma. Aria saw him once that night from across the floor. He moved like thunder wrapped in silk. Patrons parted for him. Staff bowed. His eyes, silver and stormy, swept the room and landed on her. Just for a second, her wolf stirred beneath her skin. She looked away. Later in the break room, Phoenix approached. "You're quiet," he said. Aria offered a small smile. He studied her. "You're not just quiet, you're hiding." She didn't respond. He didn't press, but something passed between them. Recognition. Two secrets side by side. As her shift ended, Aria stood outside the casino, watching the strip flicker with life. She'd made it through day one. No one knew her name. No one asked about her past. She was just another face in the crowd. But inside Crimson Bay, the game was already beginning. And somewhere in the shadows, Vincent Ashworth's collectors were stirring.
The morning after her first shift, Aria stood in the staff lounge, watching Ruby Chen scribble on a whiteboard. "Hierarchy," Ruby said, tapping the marker. "You're at the bottom. Don't take it personally." Aria didn't. She'd learned long ago that survival meant blending in, not standing out. Crimson Bay wasn't just a casino, it was a supernatural ecosystem. Vampires ran the finance department. Shifters handled security. Fae managed enchantments on the slot machines. Even the janitors had magic. Aria absorbed it all silently, her eyes catching every flicker of power, every unspoken rule. Ruby continued, "There are things we don't talk about. The high-stakes tables? Don't ask who plays. The penthouse? Don't ask who lives there. And if someone offers you a drink with glowing ice, say no." Aria nodded. She didn't need explanations. She needed to stay invisible. Later, Phoenix Williams gave her a tour of the restricted zones. "These tables," he said, gesturing to a velvet-draped room, "are where fortunes shift and territories change hands. You'll serve drinks, but don't linger. Some of these players can smell secrets." Aria kept her gaze neutral. She'd spent years hiding hers. At the end of the hallway, Phoenix paused. "This door leads to the vault. Magical contracts, bloodbound debts, and soul wagers. You don't want to know what's inside." Aria's stomach tightened. She already knew too much about supernatural debts. Her silence was one of them. Back on the main floor, Aria practiced her mute persona. She smiled politely, nodded when spoken to, and used gestures to communicate. Patrons found her mysterious. Staff found her efficient. No one questioned her silence. That was the goal. But Kieran Morrison did. He passed her twice that day, once near the roulette tables, once by the bar. Each time his gaze lingered, not in suspicion, more like curiosity. His wolf sensed something. Aria felt it too. A pull, a recognition. She buried it deep. In the break room, Ruby leaned against the fridge. "You're doing fine," she said, "but keep your head down. This place has eyes." Aria nodded. She'd limbed under watchful eyes before. She knew how to vanish in plain sight. That night, she walked home through the neon-lit streets, her thoughts heavy. The casino had rules, the supernatural world had rules, but Aria had her own. Stay silent, stay hidden, stay alive. And yet, the moment Kieran looked at her, something inside whispered, "You won't be able to hide forever."
The elevator to the penthouse was guarded by two shifters in tailored suits. Aria had never been summoned there before. But tonight, Ruby handed her a tray of rare whiskey and said, "Kieran wants it delivered personally." No explanation, just a look that said, "Don't ask questions." She stepped inside the elevator, heart steady, silence intact. The ride was smooth, but her wolf stirred uneasily. The doors opened to a private lounge bathed in amber light. Leather chairs, crystal decanters, a wall of windows overlooking the strip. And him, Kieran Morrison. He stood by the glass, back turned, silver eyes reflecting the city's glow. Alpha of the territory, owner of Crimson Bay. The kind of man who didn't need to speak to command a room. Aria approached quietly, placed the tray on the table, and turned to leave. "Wait," he said. One word. Deep, calm, laced with power. She froze. Kieran turned, steadying her. "You're the new waitress, the quiet one." Aria nodded. He stepped closer, gaze sharp, but not unkind. "You don't speak." Another nod. "Interesting." He circled her slowly, like a predator assessing something unfamiliar. Not threatening, curious. Aria kept her posture relaxed, her expression neutral. But inside, her wolf bristled. The bond pulsed faintly. One-sided. He didn't feel it yet. She did, and it terrified her. Kieran stopped in front of her. "You smell like wolf," he said, "but not from any pack I know." Aria held his gaze. No flinch, no answer, just silence. He tilted his head. "You're hiding something." She didn't deny it. He smiled, just slightly. "I like puzzles." Then he turned away, dismissing her with a wave. "You may go." Aria left without a word, heart pounding. The bond had sparked. He'd noticed her scent. Her silence intrigued him. That was dangerous. Back in the break room, Phoenix raised an eyebrow. "You met him?" Aria nodded. "And?" She shrugged. Phoenix frowned. "Be careful. Alphas don't like mysteries they can't solve." That night, Aria lay awake in her small apartment, staring at the ceiling. Kieran Morrison had looked at her. Not just seen her, but looked. Her silence had protected her for 11 years, but now it was drawing attention. She couldn't afford that. And yet, part of her wolf whispered, "He's not like the others."
11 years ago, the stakes were different. The lights of Las Vegas still shimmered, but Aria Santiago was just a teenager, watching her father gamble away their future. Diego Santiago sat at the table, sweat beading on his brow, cards trembling in his hands. Across from him sat Vincent Ashworth, elegant, cold, and far too calm. The game wasn't ordinary. The chips glowed faintly, the cards whispered, the air pulsed with supernatural tension. Diego had no idea what he'd walked into. Aria did. She'd begged him to stop, but desperation made men blind. Ashworth smiled as Diego placed his final bet. "All in," he said, "including your voice." Diego hesitated. "What does that mean?" Ashworth leaned forward. "Your daughter's silence. 11 years. If you lose, she disappears. If you win, you walk free." Diego looked at Aria. She nodded. She was willing. She believed in him. He lost. The cards fell. Ashworth collected his winnings, Diego collapsed, and Aria vanished. She didn't run far, just far enough to become invisible. She changed her name, buried her wolf, and stopped speaking. Not a word, not a whisper. For 11 years, she kept the deal, because Ashworth always collects. Now, back in the present, Aria stood in the casino's underground district. Hidden beneath the strip, it was a maze of shadowed alleys and glowing sigils, a place for supernatural beings who didn't belong anywhere else. She walked past vendors selling enchanted trinkets, past shifters nursing old wounds, past witches whispering forgotten spells. She met a vampire named Leora, who recognized her scent. "You're Santiago's girl," she said. Aria didn't respond. Leora nodded. "Smart. Silence is safer." But even here, whispers of Ashworth's collectors were spreading. They were asking questions, looking for someone who hadn't spoken in over a decade. Aria's heart pounded. The deal was almost up. 11 years of silence, payment due. She'd hoped Ashworth had forgotten. He hadn't. Back at the casino, she lingered near the high-stakes tables. Kieran passed by, his presence magnetic. He glanced at her, sensing something again. She turned away. Her silence was her shield, but it was cracking. In her apartment, she stared at the mirror. Her reflection didn't look like a victim anymore. It looked like someone preparing for war. The past wasn't just a memory. It was a shadow stretching into the present. And Vincent Ashworth was waiting at the end of it.
Beneath the glittering facade of Crimson Bay, there was another world. One that didn't sparkle, didn't advertise, and didn't welcome tourists. Aria found it through a service hallway behind the staff lockers, where a hidden door opened to a staircase that spiraled downward into shadow. The air changed as she descended. The scent of magic thickened. The hum of enchantments buzzed against her skin. This was the underground, a supernatural district buried beneath Vegas, where the forgotten, the hunted, and the exiled gathered. It was a place of secrets, and Aria fit right in. She walked past stalls selling cursed trinkets and bottled moonlight. A troll bartered with a banshee over a vial of phoenix tears. A witch offered fortunes written in blood. No one asked her name. No one cared that she didn't speak. Down here, silence was currency. At a smoky tavern called the Hollow Fang, she met a shifter named Jax, who ran protection for the underground's residents. He eyed her carefully. "You're not new. You're just resurfacing." Aria gave a small nod. Jax leaned closer. "Ashworth's collectors are sniffing around. You need to be careful." She already knew that. The whispers had reached the casino. Supernatural enforcers asking questions, descriptions that matched her. The deal was nearing the end, and Ashworth never missed a payment. In a corner booth, Aria met a fae named Illyra, who specialized in magical contracts. Illyra studied her silently, then said, "You're bound. I can feel it." 11 years? Aria's eyes widened. Illyra nodded. "Ashworth's work. He's called the Collector for a reason. He doesn't just take souls, he takes futures." Aria listened, absorbing every detail. Illyra explained that Ashworth's contracts were layered with ancient magic, nearly impossible to break. But there were rumors, loopholes buried in old laws, forgotten by most. Aria didn't speak, but her silence screamed with urgency. Outside, the underground pulsed with life and danger. Aria passed a mural painted in shifting ink, faces of those who'd vanished under Ashworth's grip. She touched it briefly, her fingers brushing the image of a girl who looked too much like her. Back at the casino, she returned to work with a new edge. Her silence wasn't just protection, it was strategy. She was gathering intel, building alliances, preparing for the inevitable. Ashworth's reach was growing. His collectors were closing in. But Aria wasn't the same girl who'd vanished 11 years ago. She was ready to fight.
The scent of danger arrived before the words did.
Aria was restocking glasses behind the bar when Ruby Chen's voice cut through the hum of the casino. "Collectors were spotted at the Mirage," she said quietly, "asking about a girl who doesn't speak." Aria didn't react. Her hands kept moving, her face unreadable. But inside, her wolf stirred. The Mirage was 2 blocks away, too close. Phoenix Williams appeared beside her, his presence grounding. "They're getting bold," he said. "Ashworth's people don't usually ask questions in public." Aria met his eyes. He understood. She didn't need words. Her silence had been her shield for 11 years. Now it was a beacon. Later that night, she slipped into the underground again. The district buzzed with tension. Whispers of Ashworth's collectors spread like wildfire. A vampire named Leora pulled her aside. "They're asking about a mute wolf. That's you, isn't it?" Aria didn't answer. Leora sighed. "You need protection." Protection was a luxury Aria couldn't afford, but she wasn't alone anymore. Back at the casino, Phoenix cornered her near the staff lockers. "You need to tell me what you're running from," he said. Aria hesitated, then pulled out a small silver token from her pocket. The collector's mark. Phoenix's eyes narrowed. "Ashworth?" She nodded. Phoenix exhaled slowly. "That man doesn't just collect debts, he collects people. You're not just hiding, you're surviving." Aria looked away. Phoenix stepped closer. "I won't let him take you." It was the first promise she'd heard in years. The next day, Kieran summoned her again. She entered his office, tray in hand, silence intact. He studied her as she poured his drink. "You're not just quiet, you're haunted." Aria paused. He leaned forward. "I can protect you, but I need to know what I'm protecting you from." She didn't speak. Couldn't. The contract still held. Kieran's wolf stirred visibly. He didn't understand the silence, but he felt the weight of it. "You're not just a waitress, you're something else." Aria turned to leave. His voice followed her. "I'll find out, one way or another." That night, Aria stood on the rooftop of her apartment, watching the strip flicker below. The city was closing in. Ashworth's collectors were circling. Her silence was no longer enough. But inside Crimson Bay, she had allies now. Phoenix, Ruby, and maybe, just maybe, Kieran. She wasn't ready to speak, but she was ready to fight.
The velvet envelope arrived during Aria's shift. Ruby handed it to her with a raised brow. "You've been requested," she said. "Kieran's private table, high roller service." Aria stared at the gold seal. She hadn't spoken a word in 11 years, but somehow she kept being pulled closer to the one man who made silence feel loud. The VIP lounge was unlike the rest of the casino. Quiet, controlled, every detail curated for power players. The air shimmered faintly with protective wards. Aria stepped inside, tray balanced, posture perfect. Kieran sat at the center table, surrounded by supernatural elites, vampire lords, fae diplomats, shifter alphas. But his eyes found her instantly. She placed his drink gently, avoiding eye contact. But Kieran didn't look away. His gaze followed her movements, tracking her like a predator watching something familiar yet elusive. His wolf stirred, so did hers. The game began. Cards moved, chips clinked, deals were made in glances and gestures. Aria served drinks, her silence a constant presence. But Kieran kept watching, not with suspicion, something deeper. Recognition, curiosity, pull. Later, as the lounge emptied, he spoke. "You feel familiar," he said. Aria paused. "Not just your scent, your silence. It's loud." She didn't respond. Couldn't. The contract still held. But her eyes met his, and something tasked between them. A flicker of understanding. A thread of connection. Over the next few nights, she was assigned to his table again, and again. Each time the tension grew, not hostile, magnetic. Kieran began to anticipate her movements. She learned his drink preferences, his moods, his tells at the poker table. They spoke without words. One night, he reached for her hand as she placed his glass. Just a brush of fingers. Her wolf surged. His eyes darkened. "You're not just quiet. You're hiding." Aria pulled back gently, but the bond pulsed stronger. Staff began to notice. Whispers spread. The alpha favored the mute waitress. Phoenix warned her, "You're drawing attention. That's not safe." Aria knew, but she couldn't stop the pull. Kieran's presence was both danger and sanctuary. In her apartment, she stared at the envelope again. VIP service. It was supposed to be a privilege, but for her, it was exposure. Every glance, every gesture, every silent exchange chipped away at the wall she'd built. Kieran Morrison was getting closer, and Aria Santiago was running out of places to hide.
The casino never truly slept, but in the quiet hours between midnight and dawn, it breathed differently. Softer. Slower. That's when Aria found herself most often near Kieran Morrison, serving drinks, clearing tables, and exchanging glances that said more than words ever could. Their connection was growing, not through dialogue but through rhythm. Aria anticipated his needs before he voiced them. Kieran began to read her expressions like a language, a raised brow, a tilt of her head, the way her fingers lingered on a glass. It was a conversation built on silence. One night, during a lull in the VIP lounge, Kieran gestured for her to sit. She hesitated, then lowered herself into the chair beside him. He didn't speak, just watched her. Then, slowing, he slid a card across the table. The Queen of Hearts. Aria blinked. He smiled. "You remind me of her. Quiet, but powerful." She didn't react, but inside her wolf stirred. Over the next few nights, their silent exchanges deepened. Kieran would tap twice on the table when he wanted her attention. She'd respond with a subtle nod. He'd raise a glass when he was troubled. She'd bring him his preferred drink without being asked. It was a language only they understood. Other staff began to notice. Ruby Chen raised an eyebrow. "He's watching you," she said. "More than usual." Phoenix added, "Alphas don't bond like that unless something's brewing." Aria remained silent, but she felt it too. The pull, the tension, the way her wolf responded to his presence like a magnet to steel. One evening, Kieran reached out and gently tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was small, intimate. Aria froze. He leaned in. "I don't know who you are, but I know you're not just a waitress." She didn't move, didn't speak, but her eyes met his, steady and unflinching. Later in the staff lounge, Phoenix confronted her. "You're getting too close," he warned. "If Ashworth finds out, he'll use it against you." Aria nodded. She knew the risk, but the bond was growing, and bonds like this didn't ask permission. That night, as she walked home beneath the flickering neon sky, Aria felt the weight of her silence more than ever. It had protected her, hidden her, but now it was becoming something else. A bridge between her and the alpha who was starting to hear everything she didn't say.
The air shifted the moment he walked in. Vincent Ashworth didn't need an announcement. His presence was enough. Tall, polished, and unearthingly calm, he moved through Crimson Bay Casino like he owned it. Technically, he didn't, but his contracts did, and that made him dangerous. Aria spotted him from across the floor. Her breath caught, but she didn't flinch. 11 years of silence had taught her how to freeze without looking frozen. She turned smoothly, tray in hand, and vanished into the crowd. Ashworth's eyes scanned the room, not searching, hunting. He greeted Ruby Chen with a smile too sharp to be friendly. "Just passing through," he said. "Thought I'd enjoy the ambience." Ruby nodded, but her posture stiffened. She knew what he was. Kieran Morrison appeared moments later, drawn by the shift in energy. The Alpha's gaze locked onto Ashworth. "Didn't know you were in town," he said coolly. Ashworth smiled. "I go where the debts lead me." Aria stayed in the shadows, watching. Her wolf stirred uneasily. Ashworth hadn't seen her yet, but he would. It was only a matter of time. Phoenix found her near the staff hallway. "He's here," he said. Aria nodded. "You need to stay invisible." She nodded again, but her silence was no longer enough. Ashworth's collectors had been circling for weeks. Now the spider was in the web. In the VIP lounge, Ashworth took a seat at one of Kieran's private tables. The game was casual, on the surface. Cards moved, chips clinked. But beneath it all, tension simmered. Kieran watched Ashworth like a hawk. Ashworth watched everyone else, especially the staff. Aria was reassigned to the main floor, away from the lounge. Ruby's orders. "Keep her out of sight," she'd said. But Aria lingered near the security monitors, watching the game unfold. Ashworth's fingers tapped a rhythm on the table. His eyes flicked toward the hallway she'd just exited. He was close. Later, Kieran confronted Ruby. "Why is he really here?" Ruby hesitated. "He's looking for someone, a girl. Mute. Wolf scent." Kieran's jaw tightened. "Aria?" Ruby didn't answer. She didn't have to. That night, Aria sat in her apartment, lights off, heart racing. Ashworth had entered her world again, not through whispers, not through collectors, but in person. The man who'd stolen her voice was now steps away, and Kieran Morrison was starting to ask the right questions.
The casino was quiet, not closed. Crimson Bay never truly closed, but hushed. The high rollers had retreated to their suites. The supernatural buzz had dimmed to a low hum. Aria lingered near the bar, wiping down glasses she'd already cleaned twice. She wasn't waiting, not officially, but she hadn't left either. Kieran Morrison stepped out from the shadows of the VIP lounge. No guards, no entourage, just him. His shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled up. Less alpha, more man. He crossed the floor slowly, stopping a few feet from her. "You always stay late," he said. Aria met his gaze. No nod, no smile. Just silence. Kieran leaned against the bar. "I've been trying to figure you out." His voice was low, thoughtful. "You don't speak. You don't flinch. You move like someone who's been hunted." Aria's fingers tightened around the glass. He noticed. "I don't need your secrets," he said, "but I need to know if you're in danger." She looked away. That was answer enough. He stepped closer. "I can protect you, but I need you to trust me." Aria's eyes flicked up. Trust was a luxury she hadn't afforded anyone in years, but something in his voice, steady, unforced, made her wolf stir. Kieran reached out, slowly, and placed a single card on the bar, the ace of spades. He said, "This is my tell. When I'm bluffing, I tap it twice." Aria stared at the card. A gesture, a symbol, an offering. She picked up the card, turned it over, and placed it back down. No words, but he smiled anyway. "You understand me," he said, even without speaking. The moment stretched, quiet, charged. Then Aria stepped back. Just one pace, enough to break the tension. Kieran's smile faded. "You're afraid, not of me, but of what I represent." She didn't deny it. He sighed. "I don't know what happened to you, but I know you're not just surviving. You're waiting for something." Aria's eyes flickered. He was close, too close. She turned and walked away, leaving the card behind. Kieran watched her go, frustration simmering beneath his calm. He didn't understand her silence, but he felt the weight of it, and the bond between them was growing stronger. In her apartment, Aria sat by the window, the ace of spades now tucked in her pocket. She hadn't meant to take it, but she had, and that meant something.
The casino's security office was dimly lit, cluttered with monitors and half-drunk coffee cups. Phoenix Williams leaned over a glowing screen. his jaw tight. Aria stood beside him, silent as ever, watching the footage loop. Vincent Ashworth, walking the floor, pausing, looking, almost sniffing the air. He's narrowing in, Phoenix said. He's not just guessing anymore. Someone's feeding him breadcrumbs. Aria's fingers curled around the edge of the desk. She didn't need to speak. Phoenix could read her tension like a pulse. He turned to her. You need to tell me everything. I can't protect you if I don't know what I'm up against. She hesitated, then pulled out the silver token again, the collector's mark. Phoenix stared at it, then exhaled. So it's true. You're bound to him. Aria nodded. Phoenix paced the room. Ashworth's contracts are ironclad, but they're not unbreakable. There are ways. Dangerous ones. He stopped. You've been silent for 11 years. That's not just survival. That's strategy. She met his gaze. He saw it now. How her silence had been a weapon, not just a shield. He's not just security, he said. I'm supernatural too. Fire elemental. My kind doesn't play well with collectors. He held out his hand. A flicker of flame danced across his palm. Ashworth's people fear fire. It burns through bindings. Aria's eyes widened. She hadn't known. Phoenix stepped closer. We're not alone. Ruby knows things. The underground has allies. You don't have to face this alone anymore. She nodded slowly. A silent agreement. A shift. That night, Phoenix escorted her through the casino's back corridors, showing her hidden exits, blind spots, and escape routes. If things go bad, he said, you run here. I'll cover you. Aria memorized every turn. Later, in the staff lounge, Ruby pulled her aside. She told me, she said, about Ashworth, about the contract. Aria tensed. Ruby softened. You're not the first he's tried to break, but you might be the first to fight back. The three of them, Aria, Phoenix, Ruby, formed a quiet alliance. No declarations, no promises, just shared purpose. Ashworth's collectors were asking more specific questions now. Descriptions, patterns, names. Someone had tipped them off. Aria didn't know who, but she knew it was coming. In her apartment, she lit a candle and watched the flame flicker. Phoenix's fire, her silence, Ruby's knowledge. Together, they were building something. Not just defense, but resistance.
The scent of dominance rolled through Crimson Bay like a thundercloud. Kieran Morrison was no longer just watching Aria. He was circling her, quietly, intentionally. The Alpha's instincts had shifted, and the supernatural community was starting to notice. It began with small gestures, a hand on her lower back as he passed, a lingering glance that made vampires raise their brows, a low growl when a fae flirted too close. Aria didn't respond, but her silence was no longer neutral. It was charged. Phoenix pulled her aside near the staff lockers. He's marking you, he said. Not officially, but everyone can smell it. Aria blinked. Phoenix continued. Alphas don't do that unless they're serious. You need to decide if you're going to let him. She didn't answer, but her wolf was restless. Later that night, Kieran summoned her to the VIP lounge. The room was quiet, the air thick with tension. He didn't speak right away, just watched her. Then, softly, you feel like mine. Aria's breath caught. He stepped closer. I don't know your story, but I know your scent, and it's driving me mad. She didn't move, couldn't. The mate bond pulsed between them, stronger than ever. Kieran's wolf was responding, possessive, protective. Aria's silence was no longer a barrier. It was a challenge. Outside the lounge, whispers spread. The Alphas claimed the mute girl, someone said. She's his mate, another murmured. Aria felt the shift. Patrons treated her differently, some with respect, others with suspicion. Supernatural politics were delicate. An acclaimed mate changed everything. Ruby Chen pulled her aside. You're under his protection now, she said. That's good, but it's also dangerous.
Alphas have enemies, and Ashworth doesn't care about mate bonds. Aria understood. Kieran's protection was powerful, but it painted a target on her back. That night, she walked the casino floor with new eyes. Every glance from a vampire, every smirk from a fae, every growl from a rival shifter. They all saw her differently now. Not just a waitress, not just silent. Claimed. In her apartment, she stared at her reflection. The girl who'd vanished 11 years ago was gone. In her place stood someone marked by an alpha, someone who couldn't hide anymore. Kieran Morrison had drawn a line, and Aria Santiago was standing on it.
The casino lights blurred as Aria carried a tray past the blackjack tables. Her steps faltered when she saw him, Diego Santiago. Her father, older now, hollow-eyed, shoulders hunched beneath a threadbare coat. He looked like a man who'd lost everything and kept walking anyway. He didn't see her at first. He was arguing with the dealer, slurring his words, desperate for credit. Aria ducked behind a column, heart pounding. 11 years of silence hadn't prepared her for this moment. She'd imagined it, dreaded it, but never expected it to happen here. Kieran appeared beside her, sensing her tension. "You know him?" he asked. Aria didn't move. Kieran followed her gaze. "That's Diego Santiago," he said. "Used to be a player, until Ashworth broke him." Aria's breath caught. Kieran turned to her slowly. "He's your father." She didn't nod, didn't deny it, just stood there, frozen. Diego stumbled toward the bar, demanding a drink. Ruby intercepted him. "You're not welcome here," she said. He waved a crumpled contract. "I need to speak to the collector," he muttered. "He'll listen. He owes me." Ruby's face hardened. "You owe him." Kieran stepped forward. "Let him speak," he said. Diego turned, eyes bloodshot, and saw Aria. He froze. "Aria?" he whispered. She didn't respond. His voice cracked. "You're alive!" She stared at him, expression unreadable. Her silence was louder than any scream. Diego dropped to his knees. "I didn't know what I was doing. I thought I could win. I thought I could fix everything." Kieran watched the scene unfold, his jaw tight. "You sold her voice. You gambled your daughter's future." Diego sobbed. "I didn't mean to. I was desperate. Ashworth promised. He lied." Aria's hands trembled. She wanted to speak, to scream, but the contract still held. Her silence was her prison. Kieran stepped between them. "You need to leave," he said. "She's under my protection now." Diego looked up, broken. "I came to warn her. Ashworth's planning something. He wants her, not just for the debt, for leverage." Aria's eyes widened. Kieran's wolf stirred. Later in his office, Kieran paced. "He's telling the truth. Ashworth's making moves, and you're the key." Aria sat silently, the weight of her father's sins pressing down. She hadn't spoken, not yet, but the walls were cracking. Her past had walked through the door, and her silence was no longer enough to keep it out.
Kieran Morrison wasn't sleeping. He sat in his office long after the casino closed, staring at a wall of surveillance footage. Aria's movements, her silence, her reactions to Ashworth, her encounter with Diego. The pieces were scattered, but they were starting to form a picture. She wasn't just quiet. She was bound. He pulled up the footage from the night Diego arrived. The way Aria froze, the way she didn't speak even when her father begged. Kieran's wolf stirred uneasily. This wasn't just trauma. It was something deeper, something magical. Ruby entered quietly. "You're obsessing," she said. Kieran didn't look up. "She's hiding something, something dangerous." Ruby hesitated. "She's hiding from Ashworth. That's all you need to know." Kieran turned. "That's not enough." Later, he found Phoenix near the security hub. "Tell me everything," he said. Phoenix didn't argue. He explained the contract, the silence, the collector's mark. Kieran listened, jaw clenched. "He bound her voice?" Phoenix nodded. "For 11 years. Payment due soon."
Kieran's wolf growled. He stormed into the VIP lounge, where Aria was clearing glasses. She turned, startled. He didn't speak at first, just stared. Then softly, "You should have told me." Aria held his gaze. Her silence was steady, but her eyes flickered with pain. "I could have helped," he said. "I would have helped." She stepped back. He followed. "You're not just a waitress, you're a prisoner." Aria's hands trembled. Kieran reached out, gently touching her wrist. "Let me fight for you." She didn't pull away. That night, he called a meeting with Ruby and Phoenix. "We need to prepare," he said. "Ashworth's going to make a move, and I won't let him take her." Ruby nodded. Phoenix lit a flame in his palm. "We're with you." In her apartment, Aria sat by the window, watching the strip flicker below. Her silence had protected her, hidden her. But now it was unraveling. Kieran knew, Phoenix knew, Ruby knew. And she wasn't alone anymore. She opened her drawer and pulled out the ace of spades. Kieran's tell. His promise. She held it tightly, heart pounding. The truth was out. And the silence was starting to break.
The storm didn't arrive with thunder. It came with suits. Ashworth's enforcers entered Crimson Bay in silence, dressed like businessmen, eyes like predators. They didn't flash weapons. They didn't need to. Their presence was a declaration. The collector was done playing games. Aria felt it instantly, the shift in air, the way the crowd parted, the way Ruby's voice dropped when she said, "They're here." Phoenix met her near the staff hallway. "5 of them," he said, "all marked, all bound to Ashworth." Aria's wolf stirred. She'd seen these types before, cold, efficient, magically enhanced. They didn't ask questions, they collected. Kieran was already moving. He stepped onto the casino floor, his alpha aura flaring. Patrons backed away, staff froze. The enforcers didn't blink. They were prepared. This wasn't intimidation, it was extraction. Aria moved quickly, ducking behind the bar, heart pounding. Her silence had kept her safe, but now it was time to act. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a charm Elira had given her in the underground, a burst sigil, designed to disrupt magical bindings. She threw it. The sigil exploded in light, knocking 2 enforcers off balance. Chaos erupted. Spells flew, shifters shifted, vampires hissed. The casino became a battleground of supernatural politics. Kieran roared, shifting mid-stride, his wolf massive and furious. He slammed into the lead enforcer, claws tearing through enchanted armor. Phoenix unleashed a wall of fire, forcing the others back. Ruby shouted commands, activating protective runes hidden in the floor. Aria didn't run. She stepped into the fray, her wolf flickering beneath her skin. She moved like someone who'd been hunted her whole life and was done running. She tackled one of the enforcers, using her silence as a weapon, her presence as a surprise. The battle ended quickly. Ashworth's men retreated, wounded and humiliated, but the message was clear. He was coming. Later, in Kieran's office, Aria sat across from him, bruised but steady. He looked at her differently now, not just with curiosity, but with respect. He said, "You fought." She nodded. Her silence had cracked. Her cover was broken, and the war had begun.
The casino was still recovering from the chaos. Broken tables, scorched carpet, supernatural tension thick in the air. But the real shift hadn't come from the fight. It came from what Kieran did next. He stood in the center of the VIP lounge, surrounded by staff and patrons, his voice steady and unmistakably alpha. "Aria Santiago is under my protection," he said. "From this moment forward, she is claimed." The room fell silent. Claiming wasn't casual. It was primal, binding, a declaration that echoed through supernatural law. Aria stood behind him, stunned. Her heart raced. Her wolf surged. She hadn't asked for this, but part of her had always known it was coming. Ashworth's enforcers froze. One of them stepped forward. "Claiming doesn't erase debt. You know the laws." Kieran's eyes flared silver. "I know them better than you. And I know what happens when you threaten a claimed mate on neutral ground. The enforcers retreated, not defeated, but stalled. Later in his office, Kieran paced. I had to do it. It was the only way to buy time. Aria sat across from him, silent. He turned to her. I didn't do it to trap you. I did it to protect you. She reached into her pocket and placed the ace of spades on his desk, his tell, his promise. He stared at it, then at her. Do you trust me? She nodded. The bond pulsed stronger now, not just instinct, but choice. News spread fast. Other supernatural patrons whispered, she's his mate. Ashworth won't like this. The Alpha's making a move. Aria felt the shift. Her silence was no longer just mystery. It was power. She was no longer invisible. Phoenix pulled her aside. This changes everything, he said. You're not just hiding. You're part of his territory now. Ruby added, Ashworth will challenge it. He always does. And he did. A formal notice arrived the next morning. A magical scroll, sealed in blood. Ashworth's challenge, the debt supersedes mate bonds. He would collect, claimed or not. Kieran read it aloud, then burned it in his palm. He wants a war, he said, then he'll get one. Aria stood beside him, no longer just a waitress, no longer just silent. She was claimed, protected, and preparing. Her voice was still bound, but her presence was louder than ever.
The scroll arrived wrapped in black silk, sealed with blood-red wax. Ruby placed it on Kieran's desk without a word. Aria stood nearby, her heart thudding. She recognized the seal. Ashworth's contracts were never subtle. They were declarations of ownership. Kieran broke the seal and unrolled the parchment. The ink shimmered with enchantment, resisting the light. He read aloud, voice steady. Contract number D117, Santiago. Terms, one voice, 11 years of silence, payment due upon completion. Collateral, Aria Santiago. Aria closed her eyes. The words were familiar, burned into her memory. She'd lived under their weight for over a decade, but hearing them spoken aloud, by Kieran, made them real in a new way. Phoenix leaned over the scroll. There's more, he said. Clause 17. Upon completion of silence, the collector reserves the right to claim the subject as payment. No exceptions, no appeals. Kieran's jaw clenched. He wants her, not just to settle a debt, to use her. Ruby nodded. She's leverage. If Ashworth claims her, he controls you, your territory, your pack. Aria stepped forward, pointing to a line near the bottom. Kieran read it. Claim may be voided only by supernatural challenge or unanimous alpha tribunal. He looked up. He's forcing our hand. Phoenix paced. This wasn't just about her voice. It was a setup, from the beginning. Diego's game was rigged. Ashworth planned this. Aria's silence felt heavier than ever. She wanted to scream, to fight. But the contract still held. Her voice was bound, her fate inked in blood and magic. Kieran turned to her. He's trying to use you to break me, to take everything I've built. Aria nodded. She knew. She'd known for years. But now, the trap was closing. Later, in the underground, Alira examined the scroll. She said, it's old magic, layered, twisted, but not perfect. There are cracks. Aria leaned in. Alira pointed. If you speak before the claiming, the contract activates. He takes you instantly. But if you speak during a challenge, it resets the terms. Aria's eyes widened. Back at the casino, Kieran gathered his pack. Ashworth wants war. Then we give him one. But we do it on our terms. Aria stood beside him, the scroll clutched in her hands. Her silence was no longer submission. It was strategy. The ledger had been revealed, and the final hand was approaching.
The challenge had been issued. Ashworth wanted Aria, not just to settle a debt, but to seize control. And the supernatural world was watching. Word spread fast. Alphas from neighboring territories arrived at Crimson Bay, drawn by the scent of conflict. Some came out of curiosity, others came to choose sides. The casino transformed overnight from sanctuary to battleground. Kieran stood at the center of it all, his posture rigid, his aura unmistakably alpha. Aria remained close, silent but steady. Her presence was no longer questioned. She was the reason this war was brewing, and she was no longer hiding. The first to arrive was Alpha Dorian of the Northern Ridge Pack, cold, calculating. He eyed Aria with interest. "She's the girl Ashworth wants?" Kieran nodded. Dorian smirked. "Then she's valuable." Kieran growled. "She's mine." Others followed. Alpha Nyla of the Crescent Moon Pack, Alpha Juno of the Southern Claw, even rogue leaders with no formal territory. Each brought their own agendas, their own politics, their own opinions on whether a debt could override a mate bond. The tribunal was forming. Ruby Chen moved through the chaos like a conductor, organizing meetings, managing tensions. Phoenix kept watch, fire simmering beneath his skin. Aria stayed silent, absorbing every word, every glance, every threat. In a private meeting, Kieran addressed the gathered alphas. Ashworth's contract is corrupt. He manipulated Diego Santiago. He bound a child's voice. And now he wants to use her to claim my territory. Murmurs rippled through the room. Some nodded, others remained skeptical. Alpha Dorian leaned forward. "The contract is valid, but the method, that's questionable." Nyla added, "If she speaks during a challenge, the terms reset. That's old law, forgotten, but still binding." Kieran turned to Aria. "You'll have to speak. During the challenge. It's the only way." Her eyes widened. The silence she'd carried for 11 years wasn't just habit, it was protection. Breaking it would be a risk, but it was time. Later in the underground, Alira confirmed it. The moment you speak, the contract fractures, but only if it's during a sanctioned challenge. Otherwise, Ashworth can claim you instantly. Aria nodded. She was ready. The supernatural community was choosing sides. Some backed Ashworth, drawn by power. Others rallied behind Kieran, loyal to honor. The lines were being drawn, and in the center of it all stood Aria, silent, but not for much longer.
The supernatural community didn't breathe that night. Crimson Bay was packed. Alphas, enforcers, witches, fae, vampires, all drawn by the storm brewing around one silent girl. Aria Santiago stood at the center of it, claimed by an alpha, bound by a contract, and hunted by a collector. But tonight, she would speak. Kieran stood beside her, his aura pulsing with power. Phoenix and Ruby flanked them, eyes sharp, ready for anything. Ashworth's challenge had been accepted. The tribunal was watching, the rules were clear. If Aria spoke during the sanctioned challenge, the contract would fracture. Ashworth arrived with his usual calm, dressed in black, smile razor thin. "You're late," he said. Kieran didn't respond. He was focused on Aria. She stepped forward. The crowd leaned in. The silence was suffocating. 11 years of quiet. 11 years of hiding. 11 years of fear. Aria opened her mouth and spoke. "I am not yours." The words rang out like thunder. Magic cracked in the air. The contract shimmered, then split down the middle, burning from the inside out. Ashworth's eyes widened. The tribunal gasped. The collector's grip had been broken. Aria's voice was steady, clear, fierce. "I was never yours." Kieran's wolf surged, responding to the shift. Phoenix let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Ruby smiled, just slightly. The supernatural world had witnessed something rare, something powerful. Aria Santiago had found her voice, and she wasn't giving it back. Ashworth stepped forward, fury simmering beneath his calm. "You broke the terms." The tribunal leader, Alpha Nyla, raised a hand. "She spoke during the challenge. The contract is void." Ashworth growled. "This isn't over." Kieran stepped in front of Aria. "It is." Later, in the quiet of Kieran's office, Aria sat across from him. Her voice was soft now, but still strong. "I didn't know if I could do it," she said. Kieran smiled. "You did." She looked at the ace of spades on his desk. "I kept it, even when I couldn't speak." He nodded. "You never needed words to be heard." Outside, the casino buzzed with whispers. The mute girl had spoken. The collector had been challenged, and the supernatural world would never be the same. Aria Santiago had found her voice, and she wasn't giving it back.
The tribunal convened beneath the mirrored ceiling of Crimson Bay's grand ballroom. Magic shimmered in the air, woven into the walls centuries ago when supernatural law was still carved in blood and bone. Tonight, those laws would be tested. Aria stood beside Kieran, her voice newly freed, her silence now legend. Alphas from across the continent filled the room, some allies, some opportunists. Ashworth sat at the far end, calm as ever, fingers steepled, eyes calculating. The lead adjudicator, Alpha Nyla, stepped forward. "The challenge has been accepted. The contract has been fractured, but the debt remains." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Aria's voice had broken the binding, but not the consequences. Ashworth rose. The girl was collateral. Her voice was the currency. The silence was the payment. She spoke before the debt was cleared. Kieran growled. "She spoke during the challenge. That resets the terms." Nyla nodded. "That is the law. Ancient, binding, but rarely invoked." Phoenix stepped forward. Ashworth manipulated the contract. He preyed on a desperate father. He bound a child's voice. That's not debt, that's theft. Ruby added, "And now he seeks to use her to claim territory. That's not collection, that's conquest." Ashworth didn't flinch. "The law is on my side." Nyla raised a hand. "The law is on no one's side. It is the law." She turned to Aria. "You have spoken. You have broken the silence, but the debt must be weighed. The tribunal will decide." Aria stepped forward. Her voice was soft but clear. "I was a child. I didn't choose the contract. I didn't sign it. I survived it." The room fell silent. Her words carried weight, truth, power. Nyla nodded. "We will deliberate." Hours passed. The ballroom emptied. Aria sat with Kieran, her hand in his, her wolf calm for the first time in years. Phoenix paced. Ruby whispered with allies. Ashworth waited, unreadable. Finally, Nyla returned. "The tribunal has ruled. The contract is void. The debt is dissolved. Aria Santiago is free." Ashworth stood slowly. "This isn't over." Kieran stepped forward. "It is for her." Ashworth turned and vanished into the crowd. Later, on the rooftop of Crimson Bay, Aria watched the city flicker below. Her voice was hers again, her fate reclaimed. The ancient laws had spoken, and for the first time in 11 years, she was truly free.
Crimson Bay had always been neutral ground. That was the rule. That was the magic. But rules bend when power shifts, and tonight they were bending fast. The tribunal's ruling had barely cooled when whispers began. Factions questioned the casino's neutrality. Ashworth's allies claimed Kieran had weaponized the space by claiming Aria. Others argued the collector had violated the sanctity first. Either way, the balance was tipping. Ruby Chen stood in the center of the casino floor, her voice sharp. This house was built on ancient protections. It doesn't belong to Ashworth. It doesn't belong to Kieran. It belongs to the code. But the code was under fire. Kieran met with Ruby and Phoenix in the security suite. They're trying to strip our protections. If Crimson Bay loses its neutral status, Ashworth can challenge us anywhere. Phoenix frowned, and Aria becomes fair game. Aria listened quietly, her voice still raw from its return. She hadn't spoken since the tribunal, not out of fear, but strategy. Her silence was once again a tool. Ruby opened a hidden drawer and pulled out a leather-bound ledger. "This is the original charter," she said, "signed by the founding supernatural factions. It binds the casino to neutrality unless the wards are broken." Kieran leaned in. "Can they be broken?" Ruby hesitated. "Only from inside." That changed everything. Someone had tampered with the wards, someone close. The betrayal wasn't just political, it was personal. Later, Aria walked the perimeter of the casino, sensing the magic that it's fraying, not shattered, but strained. She touched a rune etched into the wall behind the bar. It pulsed weakly. Someone had siphoned its power. Phoenix joined her. "You feel it too?" She nodded. He lit a flame in his palm, casting light over the rune. This was tampered with, recently. Back in the office, Ruby traced the signatures in the charter. "There's one missing," she said. "One faction never signed. The Shadow Syndicate." Kieran's eyes narrowed. "They operate underground. Ashworth has ties." Aria stepped forward. "Then we go underground." The next move wasn't legal, it wasn't safe, but it was necessary. Crimson Bay was no longer just a casino, it was a battlefield, and the neutral zone was cracking.
The air inside Crimson Bay had changed. It wasn't the magic, it was the mistrust. Ever since the tribunal ruled in Aria's favor, the casino had felt less like a sanctuary and more like a pressure cooker. The wards were weakening, the neutral zone cracking, and someone had helped it happen. Aria could feel it in the way people looked at her now, not with curiosity, with calculation. Kieran called a closed meeting in the security suite. Ruby, Phoenix, and Aria sat around the cable, tension thick between them. "Someone inside leaked her location," Kieran said, voice low but sharp. "Ashworth's enforcers didn't guess. They knew exactly where to strike." Phoenix frowned, scanning the staff logs. "Only a handful of us knew she was staying in the staff apartments." Ruby's eyes narrowed. "Then one of that handful betrayed her." Aria stayed silent, her voice still fragile from its return, but her wolf stirred uneasily. She'd spent years hiding. Now she was exposed, and someone had made that happen. Security footage was pulled, magical traces scanned. One name kept surfacing. Lena Marrow. Cocktail waitress. Quiet. Efficient. Recently transferred from another supernatural venue, one with ties to Ashworth. Ruby confronted her in the break room. Lena didn't deny it. "I didn't know what he wanted," she said, arms crossed. "He paid me to pass along movement reports. I didn't ask questions." Ruby's voice turned cold. "You sold out a girl who hadn't spoken in 11 years. Lena shrugged. "She's not the only one with debts." Kieran arrived mid-confrontation, his aura flaring. "You're done here. Leave. Now." Lena didn't argue. She vanished into the crowd, but the damage was done. Later, Aria sat in her apartment, staring at the door. She'd trusted the silence, trusted the walls, but betrayal had slipped through the cracks. Her wolf paced restlessly. She wasn't safe, not even among allies. Phoenix knocked gently. "You okay?" She nodded. He sat beside her. "We'll tighten the circle. No more leaks. No more risks." Aria looked at him, voice barely above a whisper. "It's not just about me anymore. Ashworth's reaching for all of us." Ruby reinforced the wards. Kieran doubled security, but trust was harder to repair than magic. The staff whispered, patrons speculated, and Aria felt the sting of betrayal settle deep in her bones. She wasn't just a target, she was a symbol, and symbols attract enemies.
Ashworth didn't need magic to manipulate a room. He used history, and tonight he weaponized it. The collector arrived at Crimson Bay with a calm smile and a briefcase full of truths no one wanted to hear. Kieran stood tall, flanked by Phoenix and Ruby, but Aria felt the shift before he even spoke. This wasn't a threat. It was a confession designed to wound. Ashworth opened the case and laid out the original poker contract. Not a copy, the real thing. Signed in Diego Santiago's hand, sealed with blood magic, and annotated with a clause that hadn't been visible before. Clause 9B, he said, tapping the parchment. The game was rigged, but the player agreed to the terms anyway. Kieran's jaw tightened. You cheated. Ashworth smiled. I offered a game. He accepted. Desperation is its own consent. Aria stepped forward, eyes locked on the document. Her father's signature was shaky, desperate. She remembered that night, his panic, his promises, the way he couldn't meet her eyes. Ashworth continued, I orchestrated the entire table. The dealer was mine, the cards were marked. Diego never had a chance. Phoenix growled, You destroyed a man's life. Ashworth shrugged. I built an empire. The room fell silent. Ruby scanned the contract, her fingers glowing faintly. This clause was hidden, she said, concealed by layered enchantments, illegal ones. Ashworth didn't flinch. Prove it. The tribunal already ruled. The debt was real. The silence was served. Now the girl is mine. Kieran stepped between them. She's not yours. She never was. Aria leaned in, voice low. You think claiming her changes the game? It doesn't. It just raises the stakes. Aria's wolf stirred. She wasn't just angry, she was awakening. Her silence had been survival. Her voice was now a weapon. Later, in the underground, Alira confirmed what Ruby suspected. The contract was tampered with, but it's old magic, hard to unravel. You'll need more than proof. You'll need power. Aria looked at the parchment again. It wasn't just paper. It was the blueprint of her stolen life. Ashworth had played the long game, rigged the table, bought the silence, and now he wanted to cash in. But Aria wasn't a pawn anymore. She was the wild card, and the collector had underestimated her final hand.
The casino was quiet, but not calm. The tribunal had ruled, the contract exposed, and Ashworth's manipulation laid bare. Yet the pressure hadn't lifted. It had shifted. Aria felt it in every glance, every whisper, every moment Kieran wasn't by her side. The supernatural community wasn't satisfied with justice. They wanted resolution, and Ashworth wasn't done. Kieran's pack was restless. Phoenix had doubled patrols. Ruby kept the wards humming, but even she admitted they were thinning. Ashworth's influence was spreading like smoke, subtle, choking, impossible to contain. Aria knew what was coming. She'd seen it before. When power couldn't be taken by law, it was taken by force. She stood in Kieran's office, watching him pace. His wolf was close to the surface, protective and volatile. They're pressuring the tribunal to reopen the case, he said, claiming you spoke too late, that the challenge wasn't valid. Aria's voice was steady. They'll keep coming. He stopped. Then we fight. But she shook her head. You'll lose everything. That night, she walked the casino floor alone. Not hiding, not running, just watching. She saw the tension in the staff, the unease in the patrons, the way Ashworth's people lingered near the exits. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was the fuse. In the underground, Alira confirmed the worst. Ashworth's preparing a binding spell, she said, one that overrides tribunal rulings. It's ancient, illegal, but effective. Aria didn't flinch. How long? Alira hesitated. Days, maybe hours. Back at the casino, Aria made her decision. She found Kieran in the lounge, surrounded by pack members. She stepped into the circle, voice clear. I'm surrendering. The room froze. Kieran stood. No. She met his eyes.
If I stay, you lose your territory, your pack, everything you've built. He moved toward her, voice low. I don't care. But she did. Phoenix tried to stop her. Ruby begged her to wait, but Aria was already walking toward the exit, toward the enforcers waiting in the shadows. She didn't cry, didn't tremble. She was done being hunted, done being used. If sacrifice was the only way to break the cycle, she would make it. Ashworth's men stepped forward, binding her wrists with enchanted cuffs. Kieran roared, but the tribunal's laws held him back. Aria didn't look back. She couldn't. She was gone, and everything was about to unravel.
Aria didn't scream when they took her. She didn't fight. She didn't beg. She walked into Ashworth's custody like someone who had already made peace with the pain. The cuffs burned against her skin, enchanted to suppress her wolf, but she kept her head high. The enforcers led her through a portal hidden beneath the strip, into a world few had seen and fewer escaped. Ashworth's compound wasn't a prison. It was a palace built on broken promises. Marble floors, enchanted chandeliers, and walls lined with contracts. Each scroll represented a life bound by debt. Aria passed them silently, her eyes scanning names she recognized. Some were legends, some were ghosts. All were claimed. Her room was luxurious but sterile. No windows, no exits. Just a bed, a desk, and a mirror that watched her. Ashworth visited that evening, dressed in black silk, voice smooth as ever. "You're not a prisoner," he said. "You're an investment." Aria didn't respond. He circled her slowly. "You could have ruled beside me. Instead, you chose sentiment, loyalty, weakness." She met his gaze. "You underestimate loyalty." He smiled. "I never underestimate anything, especially not you." Days passed. Aria explored the compound under supervision. She met others, supernatural beings bound by contracts, each with a story, each with a debt. A siren who'd traded her song for freedom, a fae who'd gambled away his name, a shifter who hadn't shifted in years. They spoke in whispers, watched the guards, and waited. One night, a vampire named Cassian slipped her a note. It was written in blood ink, folded into a playing card. "There's a network. We're not all loyal to him." Aria memorized the message, then burned it. Her silence had once been survival. Now it was strategy. She began listening, mapping, watching the patterns of guards, the timing of patrols, the flicker of wards. Ashworth's empire was vast, but not flawless. Cracks existed, and cracks could be widened. In the dark, she whispered to herself, not out of fear, out of focus. Her voice was hers again, and she would use it when it mattered most. Ashworth thought he'd won, thought she'd surrendered, but Aria Santiago wasn't broken. She was gathering, and the collector's domain was about to become his downfall.
The moment Aria crossed the threshold into Ashworth's domain, something inside Crimson Bay fractured. Kieran felt it first, not just the loss of her presence, but the severing of the bond. His wolf howled beneath his skin, restless and enraged. The pack felt it too. A ripple of grief, confusion, and fury spread through the ranks. She was gone, and the silence she left behind was louder than ever. Phoenix stood at the edge of the casino floor, fists clenched, watching the staff move like ghosts. No one spoke her name. No one dared. Ruby locked herself in the warding chamber, trying to reinforce the protections that now felt hollow. Kieran didn't speak for hours. He paced, he brooded, he stared at the ace of spades she'd left behind, the only piece of her still in his territory. The pack gathered in the lounge that night, not for drinks, not for celebration, for mourning. Shifters, witches, vampires, all of them had felt her impact. She wasn't just the mute girl anymore. She was the spark that had lit the fire, and now she was the sacrifice. Kieran finally spoke. She gave herself up to protect us, to protect me. His voice was rough, barely contained.
Ashworth thinks he's won, but this isn't over. Phoenix stepped forward. We need a plan. Legal channels won't work. The tribunal's hands are tied. Ruby emerged, eyes tired but fierce. Then we go off book. They began gathering intel, every contact, every favor, every whisper from the underground. Phoenix reached out to his elemental kin. Ruby tapped into old alliances. Kieran sent envoys to neighboring packs, calling in debts long buried. The pack wasn't just mourning, they were mobilizing. In the quiet of his office, Kieran stared at the empty chair across from him, the one Aria used to sit in, silent but strong. He whispered to the bond, hoping she could feel it. "I'm coming for you." His wolf stirred, ready to tear through every barrier between them. Outside, the city kept moving. Patrons kept gambling, but beneath the surface, Crimson Bay was shifting. The pack was grieving, but grief was fuel, and loyalty was fire. Aria was gone, but she wasn't forgotten, and the pack was preparing to bring her home.
Ashworth didn't waste time. Aria had barely settled into the rhythm of captivity when he made his move. He summoned her to the obsidian chamber, his personal sanctum, carved into the heart of the compound and pulsing with old magic. The walls whispered with enchantments, and the air felt heavier, like it had been bartered for something darker. He stood at the head of a long table, dressed in ceremonial black, fingers resting on a contract that shimmered with blood ink. "You've proven resilient," he said, voice smooth as silk. "But resilience isn't power. Power is choice." Aria didn't respond. She'd learned that silence still had weight, even now. He gestured to the parchment. "Serve willingly, and I'll spare Kieran. His territory, his pack, his pride." The words hung in the air like poison. Aria stepped forward, eyes locked on the contract. "And if I refuse?" Ashworth smiled. "Then I break him. Slowly. Publicly. I'll dismantle everything he's built, one debt at a time." She didn't flinch. "You already tried that." He leaned in. "Not with you as leverage." The proposal was clear. Surrender her freedom, her voice, her future, and Kieran would be left untouched. It was twisted, strategic, and exactly what she'd expected. But Aria wasn't the same girl who'd vanished 11 years ago. She was watching, calculating, listening to the cracks in his empire. She asked for time. Back in her room, she paced. Cassian visited under the guise of delivering supplies. "He's bluffing," the vampire whispered. "But only partially. He has influence. He can make life hell for your alpha." Aria nodded. "Then I need to play along." Cassian raised a brow. "You're going to accept?" She shook her head. "I'm going to pretend." The next day, she returned to the obsidian chamber and signed the contract, just enough to trigger the illusion of compliance. Ashworth looked pleased. Smart girl. But Aria was already planting seeds. She began asking questions, touring the compound, speaking with the claimed. She wasn't surrendering. She was infiltrating. Ashworth believed he'd won, that she'd bent to his will. But Aria was building something beneath the surface. A network. A plan. A rebellion. She'd accepted the demon's proposal, but she was writing her own terms.
Aria had learned to read silence. In Ashworth's compound, it spoke louder than words. The claimed didn't cry or scream. They watched, waited, and whispered when the guards weren't listening. She moved through the halls with quiet purpose, no longer just a captive, but a seeker. Every glance, every half-spoken sentence was a thread, and she was weaving something dangerous. Cassian, the vampire who'd slipped her the note, introduced her to the others, a siren named Lyra, whose voice had been bound in exchange for her sister's freedom, a fae named Thorn, who'd lost his name in a rigged bet,
A shifter named Jax, who hadn't shifted in years because his wolf had been magically suppressed. They weren't rebels, not yet, but they were tired, and tired people listen. They met in the old archives, a forgotten wing of the compound where Ashworth stored contracts too old to matter. Aria stood beneath shelves of parchment and spoke softly. He built this place on fear, but fear cracks, and cracks spread. Lyra nodded. We've all thought about escape, but no one's ever made it past the wards. Aria stepped closer. Then we find the flaw. Thorn revealed a secret. The wards weren't uniform. Some were older, patched with weaker magic. Cassian had mapped the guard rotations. Jax had overheard a conversation about a hidden exit used for smuggling artifacts. Piece by piece, the plan began to form, not perfect, but possible. Aria didn't promise freedom. She promised movement, a shift in power, a chance to stop being pawns. She taught them how to listen like she had, how to speak only when it mattered, how to use silence as a weapon. The claimed began passing messages, marking doors, tracking patterns. Ashworth's empire was vast, but it was built on arrogance, and arrogance breeds blind spots. One night, Aria stood at her mirror and whispered, "You're not alone." It wasn't a prayer, it was a declaration. She wasn't waiting for rescue anymore, she was building it from the inside. The rebellion wasn't loud, it didn't need to be. It was quiet, strategic, growing in the shadows. And Aria Santiago was at the center of it. Ashworth had claimed her, but she was claiming back.
The storm didn't start with thunder, it started with silence. Aria's absence had carved a hollow space in Crimson Bay, but it also lit a fuse. Kieran wasn't grieving anymore. He was planning. The pack had shifted from mourning to movement, and the supernatural world was beginning to stir. Kieran called a summit beneath the casino, deep in the warded vault where secrets were safe. Phoenix, Ruby, and trusted allies gathered around the obsidian table. Kieran said, "Ashworth's reach is growing. He's not just collecting debts, he's consolidating power." Ruby nodded. "He's targeting neutral zones, undermining old alliances. If we don't act, he'll rewrite the rules." Phoenix stood, eyes glowing faintly. "There's something you need to know." He raised his hand, and flame erupted. Not just fire, but elemental force. The room pulsed with heat and ancient power. "I'm not just a shifter. I'm fireborn. My lineage goes back to the elemental courts." The revelation hit hard. Phoenix had always been loyal, but now he was something more. A weapon Ashworth hadn't accounted for. Kieran didn't hesitate. "Then we use it." Messages were sent. Old debts called in. Alphas from distant territories responded, some with caution, others with fury. The supernatural community had tolerated Ashworth's games for years, but Aria's capture had crossed a line. She wasn't just a girl anymore, she was a symbol of everything broken in the system. In the underground, Ruby met with the Shadow Syndicate. They'd refused to sign the original neutrality charter, but now they were listening. "Ashworth's empire threatens all of us," she said. "Help us, and we'll rewrite the terms together." The syndicate leader, cloaked in illusion, nodded once. "We'll consider it." Phoenix trained daily, pushing his elemental limits. Ruby fortified the casino's wards with ancient runes. Kieran reached out to Diego Santiago, who had vanished after Aria's surrender. The disgraced father returned with maps, names, and secrets, proof that Ashworth's empire had cracks. "I couldn't protect her," Diego said, "but I can help you bring her back." The storm was gathering, not loud, not chaotic, but deliberate, strategic. The supernatural world was choosing sides, and Crimson Bay was becoming the center of the resistance. Aria was still trapped, but the walls around her were starting to shake.
The pieces were finally in motion. Inside Ashworth's compound, Aria's rebellion was growing. Outside, Kieran's coalition was solidifying. The distance between them was still vast, but the plan was no longer a dream. It was a countdown. Every hour mattered. Every move had weight. Aria met with Cassian, Lyra, Thorn, and Jax in the archives. They'd mapped the guard rotations, identified weak wards, and marked the smuggling tunnel that could serve as their escape route. Cassian had bribed a junior enforcer to leave a door unlocked. Lyra had recovered a fragment of her voice, just enough to shatter glass. Thorn had found a loophole in his contract. Jax's wolf was stirring again. They weren't ready for war, but they were ready to run. Meanwhile, in Crimson Bay, Kieran stood before a map of the West Coast supernatural territories. Phoenix flanked him, flames dancing along his arms. Ruby had finished reinforcing the casino's wards and was now decoding ancient laws that could nullify Ashworth's contracts. "We hit him from both sides," Kieran said, "inside and out. We don't just rescue her, we dismantle him." Diego Santiago returned with intel from the underground. He'd traced Ashworth's original network, found the names of the witches who enchanted the contracts, and discovered a forgotten clause buried in the original charter. "If the collector loses a formal challenge," Diego said, "every contract tied to his name dissolves." Kieran's eyes narrowed. "Then we challenge him." Phoenix reached out to the elemental courts. Ruby contacted the Shadow Syndicate. Allies were aligning. Some came for justice, others came for revenge. But all came for Aria. She wasn't just a girl anymore. She was the spark that had ignited a movement. Back in her cell, Aria whispered to the mirror. "Soon." Her voice was steady, her wolf awake. She'd memorized every hallway, every rune, every guard's face. The claimed were ready, the network was in place. All they needed was the signal. Kieran stood on the rooftop of Crimson Bay, wind whipping through his hair. He looked out over the city, eyes burning with purpose. "We bring her home, and we burn his empire to the ground." The final preparations were complete. The storm was ready, and the game was about to begin.
The challenge was ancient, older than any contract, older than any tribunal. It was law carved into the bones of the supernatural world, trial by ordeal. One alpha against another. No loopholes, no politics, just power. Kieran stood before the Council of Alphas, his voice steady. "I invoke the right." The room fell silent. Even Ashworth paused, calculating the risk. He'd manipulated contracts, twisted laws, but this was different. This was primal. The council convened at dusk, beneath the open sky, where magic flowed unfiltered. Each faction sent a representative. Phoenix stood beside Kieran, flames flickering along his arms. Ruby held the charter, its pages glowing faintly. Diego Santiago arrived last, carrying the original contract, the one Ashworth had rigged. We challenged not just the debt, but the system that allowed it. Ashworth stepped forward, dressed in ceremonial black, eyes gleaming. "You're desperate. This won't save her." Kieran didn't blink. "It's not about saving. It's about ending." The council accepted the terms. The challenge would be held in 3 days. The winner would claim all debts, all territories, all rights. The loser would lose everything. Back at Crimson Bay, preparations began. Phoenix trained with elemental fury, pushing his limits. Ruby fortified the wards, ensuring no interference. Kieran walked the casino floor, memorizing every detail. He wasn't just fighting for Aria. He was fighting for every soul Ashworth had bound. In the compound, Aria felt the shift. The guards were tense. The claimed whispered. Cassian brought news. He accepted the challenge. It's happening. Aria closed her eyes, her wolf stirring. She hadn't seen Kieran in days, but she felt him, felt the bond pulling tight. She whispered to the mirror, "Win." The night before the challenge, Kieran stood on the rooftop, wind whipping through his hair. Phoenix joined him, silent. "You ready?" Phoenix asked. Kieran nodded. "I have to be." Below them, the city pulsed with magic and tension. The supernatural world was watching, waiting. Ashworth believed in control, in contracts, in leverage. But Kieran believed in something older, something stronger. The bond between mates, the fire of loyalty, the fury of justice. The challenge was set, and the final hand was about to be dealt.
The supernatural world expected blood. Trial by ordeal usually meant claws, spells, and broken bones. But Ashworth had other plans. He proposed a game, a supernatural poker tournament held in the heart of Crimson Bay, with every debt and territory on the table. The council accepted. It was unconventional, but binding. And it was exactly the kind of twisted spectacle Ashworth thrived in. Kieran didn't flinch. He'd played before. He knew the stakes. But this time, the prize wasn't just land or reputation. It was Aria, her freedom, her future. The tournament would be public, broadcast through magical channels to every faction. The rules were ancient. No cheating, no interference, no second chances. One winner, one loser. Everything on the line. The casino transformed overnight. The high roller room was enchanted, sealed with wards that pulsed with truth magic. Ruby oversaw the setup, ensuring no illusions could mask intent. Phoenix stood guard, his elemental fire ready to burn through any deception. Aria Santiago, once discreet, now stood beside his daughter's mate, offering insight into Ashworth's tactics. "He bluffs with confidence," Diego said, "but he folds when cornered." Aria watched from the shadows, hidden behind a veil cast by Cassian. She couldn't interfere, but she could observe. Her silence once was a shield, now it was a strategy. She studied Ashworth's tells, the twitch of his fingers, the way he leaned when lying, the flicker in his eyes when he thought he'd won. She passed notes to Ruby, who relayed them to Kieran in code. The tournament began at midnight. Each round escalated. Ashworth played with arrogance, throwing contracts onto the table like trophies. Kieran countered with precision, betting territory, alliances, and reputation. The crowd watched in silence, the tension thick enough to choke. By the third round, Ashworth had lost 2 minor territories and a dozen contracts. He smiled anyway. "You're playing safe. That's not how you win." Kieran didn't respond. He was waiting, watching, calculating. Aria's final note was simple. "He's bluffing. Push him." Kieran raised the stakes. All in. His entire territory, his pack, his legacy. Ashworth hesitated. Just for a second. But it was enough. The cards were dealt. And the game was no longer just a challenge. It was a reckoning.
The room was silent, but the tension screamed. Crimson Bay's high roller chamber had never held stakes like this. Every supernatural faction watched, their eyes locked on the table where Kieran and Ashworth faced off. The cards weren't just symbols, they were weapons, territory, contracts, lives. And at the center of it all, Aria. Kieran sat with quiet intensity, his wolf barely contained beneath the surface. Ashworth lounged with practiced arrogance, fingers tapping the table in rhythm with his own confidence. The game had reached its final rounds, and the pot was staggering. Ashworth had wagered his empire. Kieran had matched it with his pack, his land, his legacy. One hand would decide everything. Aria remained hidden, cloaked by Cassian's illusion, watching from the shadows. She couldn't speak aloud, but her silence had become a language. Ruby stood nearby, intercepting her signals, subtle gestures, coded glances, the rhythm of her breath. Each cue translated into strategy. Kieran trusted it, trusted her. Ashworth dealt the cards with flair, eyes gleaming. "You sure you want to bet everything on a girl who didn't speak for 11 years?" he said. Kieran didn't blink. "She's spoken louder than you ever have." The crowd murmured. The council leaned in. The final hand was underway. Kieran's cards were strong, but not unbeatable. Ashworth smirked, confident in his bluff. Aria's fingers twitched. 2 taps, 1 pause. Ruby relayed the message. Kieran raised. Ashworth hesitated. Just for a moment, but it was enough. His tell was exposed. Aria had seen it before. The twitch in his jaw, the shift in his posture. He was bluffing. Kieran pushed all in. Ashworth called. The cards hit the table. Kieran's hand was solid, 3 aces and a pair of 7s. Ashworth's smile faltered. His cards were weaker than expected. The crowd erupted. The council stood. The magic in the room surged, reacting to the outcome. The challenge was complete. The winner was clear. Ashworth tried to protest, but the truth wards flared. His empire, built on manipulation, was collapsing. Every contract tied to his name began to dissolve. The claimed felt it first. A release, a shift, a freedom they hadn't known in years. Aria stepped forward, veil dropping. Her voice rang out, clear and final. "The game is over." And this time, she wasn't bluffing.
Ashworth didn't lose gracefully. The moment Kieran's winning hand hit the table, the collector's smile cracked. Not visibly, but Aria saw it. A flicker of disbelief, a twitch of panic. He'd bet everything and lost, but Ashworth never played fair. And this time, his bluff was about to unravel. The truth wards flared as the council began verifying the outcome. Magical signatures pulsed across the table, confirming the cards, the stakes, the legality. Ashworth leaned back, feigning calm. "Well played," he said. But Ruby wasn't done. She stepped forward holding a second contract, one Diego had recovered from the underground. "This is the original ledger," she said, "and it's been tampered with." The council leaned in. Phoenix summoned flame to reveal hidden enchantments. The ink shimmered, revealing layers of illusion. Ashworth's contract wasn't just rigged, it was rewritten. Clauses had been added post-signature, terms altered, names shifted. It was fraud, buried beneath centuries of magic. Diego stepped forward, voice steady. The game 11 years ago wasn't just unfair, it was illegal. The dealer was glamored, the cards were marked, and the binding spell used on Aria violated 3 supernatural codes. The council murmured. One alpha stood. "If this is true, Ashworth's entire empire is built on deception." Aria moved through the crowd, no longer hidden. Her voice rang out. "He didn't just cheat my father, he cheated all of you." The claimed began to stir. Cassian, Lyra, Thorn, Jax, each one stepped forward, contracts in hand. "Mine was forged," Cassian said. "Mine was coerced," Lyra added. The council listened. The truth wards pulsed again. Ashworth's bluff was collapsing. He tried to speak, but the magic silenced him. The council invoked judgment. His contracts dissolved, his holdings stripped, his name blacklisted. The collector was no longer a power, he was a pariah. Kieran stood beside Aria, hand in hers. The crowd watched as the final spell broke, releasing the last of Ashworth's bindings. The claimed were free, the debts erased, the game was over. Ashworth was escorted out, silent and burning with rage, but no one looked back. Aria turned to Kieran. "You didn't just win." He smiled. "We changed the rules." And for the first time, the supernatural world saw what justice looked like.
Ashworth was gone, but the echoes of his empire still lingered. The contracts had dissolved, the claimed were free, and the supernatural world was reeling from the fallout. Crimson Bay had become the epicenter of a shift, one that couldn't be reversed. But Aria knew the game wasn't truly over until the last debt was shattered. She stood in the tribunal chamber, surrounded by council members, allies, and former captives. The air buzzed with residual magic, the kind that clung to old wounds. Ruby held the final ledger, Ashworth's master list. One name remained: Diego Santiago, her father. He stepped forward slowly, eyes heavy with guilt. "I signed the contract," he said. "I knew it was wrong, but I thought I was protecting you." Aria didn't flinch. "You gave away my voice." Diego nodded. "And I've regretted it every day since." The council prepared to seal the final dissolution, but Aria interrupted. "Wait." She walked to the center of the chamber, voice steady. "This debt isn't just about magic. It's about legacy, about silence passed down like inheritance." She turned to Diego. "You don't owe Ashworth anymore, but you still owe me." Diego lowered his head. "Then tell me how to repay it." Aria reached into her pocket and pulled out the ace of spades, the card she'd carried since the day she returned. "You gave this to me before the game, said it was lucky." She placed it on the tribunal's altar. "It wasn't luck, it was a reminder of what I lost and what I reclaimed." The council watched in silence as Aria invoked her own right, not of punishment, but of closure. She burns the card, the flame flickering with her wolf's magic. "I release the debt, not because it's forgotten, but because I'm done carrying it." The fire consumed the card, and with it the last tether to Ashworth's legacy. Diego wept quietly. The council sealed the chamber. The supernatural world had witnessed something rare, not just justice, but healing. Outside, Crimson Bay pulsed with new energy. The claimed were rebuilding, the pack was stronger, and Aria Santiago, once silent, once bound, was now the voice of change. Winner takes all. And she had taken back everything.
Crimson Bay had changed, not just in atmosphere, but in structure. The old rules had been shattered, and in their place, something new was rising. Aria stood at the center of it, no longer a symbol of silence, but the architect of reform. The supernatural world had watched her defy the Collector, rewrite her fate, and now they waited to see what she'd build. The council reconvened, this time not to judge, but to listen. Kieran stood beside Aria, his presence steady, his pack behind him. Ruby presented the proposed charter, a document etched in spellbound ink, designed to protect the vulnerable and dismantle the loopholes that had allowed predators like Ashworth to thrive. "No contract shall bind without consent," she read aloud. "No silence shall be traded for survival." Phoenix added his voice, backed by elemental fire. "Neutral zones will be sacred again. No debt, no deal, no dominion shall override sanctuary." The council murmured, some resistant, others relieved. Change was uncomfortable, but necessary. Aria stepped forward. "I lost my voice because the system allowed it. I reclaimed it because I broke the rules. Now we write better ones." Her words weren't loud, but they carried weight. The claimed stood behind her, Cassian, Lyra, Thorn, Jax, each one a living testament to what had been endured, and what would never be allowed again. The council voted. One by one, hands raised. The charter passed. The new rules were ratified. Outside, Crimson Bay pulsed with fresh magic. The wards shimmered with new protections. The casino reopened, not just as a haven for supernatural beings, but as a symbol of resistance, resilience, and rebirth. Aria walked the floor, no longer hiding. Patrons greeted her with nods, respect etched into every glance. Kieran met her at the bar, sliding a drink across the counter. "You rewrote the game," he said. She smiled. "We did." Ruby joined them, exhausted but proud. Phoenix leaned against the wall, flames flickering lazily. The pack was whole. The city was healing. Later that night, Aria stood on the rooftop, wind brushing her skin. She looked out over the strip, the stars above, the world below. Her voice was hers, her future unwritten, but this time she held the pen. The rules had changed, and she was the reason why.
Staying with me till now means you enjoyed the story. Don't forget to give it a like. It really helps the channel grow. Comment your thoughts and what you expect from us, and your most intriguing moment in the story. Make sure to subscribe and tap the bell so you never miss any story that drops, and share this video with friends who love stories like this as much as you do. Your support is what keeps these stories alive, and I can't wait to share the next one with you.